Hi everybody, welcome to another drop. And in this video, we're going to talk about a very, very important idea. And I think I always say that, right? But this one is really, really important for me because it relates directly to existentialism. We're gonna see Maslow's take on knowing ourselves. And I've said this many times in the past. Existentialism really comes down to two things: being authentic and knowing yourself. Those two things. And so let's see what Maslow has to say about this particular point, knowing oneself. But I got to start with a confession. I have to make a confession here. For many many years, most of my life really, I grew up thinking that the only way to really understand the world reliably is through your reason, right? Using logic, analyzing things. So I hated when people say things like, you got to listen to your heart and you got to pay attention to how you feel about things. And supposedly that tells you what's important, what matters, or that's like a reliable way of learning about anything. And I thought it was, to be honest with you, I thought it was stupid, right? People making these comments. You have to follow your heart. See how it feels like. And I was like, okay, I mean, the most unreliable thing probably is our feelings. That's what I always believed until I started becoming more familiar with the psychology literature, especially when I started reading the big names in psychology: Freud, Jung, Maslow, obviously, Carl Rogers, and others. I realized that I was wrong. Feelings do indeed play a crucial part in learning about the world and learning about ourselves. So let's see what Maslow has to say on this point. And according to Maslow, the only way, not just a good way, but the only way for Maslow that we can ever know what is right for us is that it feels better subjectively than any alternative. It feels good. That's good. That's the right thing. The right way to evaluate things. Okay. The new experience, whatever experience we engage in for the first time, validates itself rather than by any other outside criterion. It is self-justifying, self-validating. If you're trying something, you're doing something for the first time, and you feel good about it, okay, that's it. That's the right thing to do. The opposite is also true, right? If you're trying something for the first time, maybe you meet somebody for the first time, and you don't feel right. There's something inside of you that says, there's something wrong here with this person or place or activity or whatever. According to Maslow, well, that is self-justifying. You don't have to find or search for any other outside criterion of, I don't know, to assess if the experience was good or not good, and so on. So your feelings, right? Now there's another quote. Maslow says, in this way, we learn what we are good at, what we really like or dislike, what our tastes, our judgments, and capacities are. In a word, this is the way in which we discover self and answer the ultimate questions: who am I? What am I? These are the existential questions. And it's so important because once we have an answer to these questions, to the question, who am I mean, that changes everything. That has tremendous benefits, psychological benefits. I mentioned many times in the past the common ground between existentialism and psychology. And it's more evident in Maslow's work than in any other psychologist, to my knowledge at least. So according to Maslow, it is through our feelings that we know what we are good at. We use feelings to evaluate what we're good, our capacities, our talents. I think actually, it makes sense because Maslow is saying something like this, right? Like if you consider singing, for example, let's say you like to sing, you sort of know deep inside if you're actually good at singing or not. Like you can tell. And maybe the way you tell is by, obviously, you compare your voice with maybe musicians, artists, celebrities, right, who sing, and then you sort of compare your voice with them, and you sort of know inside, like, man, I'm not that bad at singing. Maybe I'm kind of good. So we feel that we are good at some things and not good at other things. So that's very, very important to evaluate our talents. It's so important, right? Our feelings tells you what it's valuable, what matters. Okay, and for example, you'll know engaging in some activity. You'll know if the activity, once again, it's meaningful to you, it's appealing to you. I'm thinking people sometimes people who have never tried, let's say, volunteering. And I've heard people saying these kind of things, right? Like they volunteered once to help elderly people, let's say. And I've heard people making comments after volunteering, saying things like, "Whoa, when I was helping the elderly people, I felt a very, very strong connection with these people and with the activity, with the work that this organization was doing for the elderly, whatever." And people immediately feel like, okay, there's something valuable here, and this is what Maslow is saying. We absolutely must validate and pay attention to our feelings. Pay attention and validate because it tells us who we are. Now, contrast that with people, there's so many people in this category, people who like to go with the flow, people who avoid confrontations, people who want to just get along with everybody, right? And they don't want to cause any disturbance in the relation in his or her relationship with his or her friends. And let's say you hang out with a group of friends who are big football fans, but you're not that much into football. As a matter of fact, you don't like football. But then, because you really care about this group of friends, and they always hang around at bars watching games, and maybe going to the stadiums, and maybe even buying jerseys, sports jerseys and stuff. And you don't do, you want to fit in, so you also follow along and you buy the jerseys, and you go to the bars and watch the games. But deep inside, you know what you're feeling. What you're feeling is like, man, I really don't like this. Well, when you live that way, unfortunately, like many people, what you're doing is you're betraying yourself. You're not being genuine. This is something we talked about in a previous video. Betraying yourself. So, but this is how you know you're betraying yourself. Pay attention to what you're feeling, how you're feeling about that particular activity or group or whatever, whatever thing you're engaged in, whatever thing you're listening to, whatever thing you say. Pay attention how you feel about it and validate it. And you know what? If you're hanging out with friends who like football, for example, and you don't, well, you can just say it. You don't have to be a fake. You can say, hey, you know what? I love you guys, but football is not my thing. Maybe I'll let you guys hang out this weekend on your own, but I'm not going. And if your friends really care about you, they should respect that. But be true to yourself. Don't go with the flow, because if you do, that means that you're lost. You're lost. You're not living your genuine life. You're not acting out what is truly valuable to you. And your feelings are always going to tell you that. So now, people at work, this is something that I do always. When I go to an office, I go to a store, I go to any place where I see people working. Airport, I was recently at the airport. I always look at people's faces, people who work there. Okay? And I can immediately tell, and so can you. I can tell when people really love what they're doing, when they hate what they're doing, or when they're like, meh, it's no big deal for them. It's so evident when you look at their faces. And yeah, what are you doing working in a job that you detest. Why are you doing it? Because it gives you security? Because it's good pay? Do you remember the safety needs and the growth needs? Maybe you're prioritizing your safety needs. But by prioritizing your safety needs, because you're still at this job and you've been at this job for years because of the pay and the benefits and whatever. And okay, and that's guarantees security, right? You pay your bills and stuff. But that's not really you. I mean, there's no growth there, and it's evident in your face if you're that person who's not happy with your job. And so I hope you know what I'm saying. The same is true of people who love what they do. It's so evident. You just have to look at people working, and to me, I don't know. To me, it's super easy, super evident when people love what they do and when they hate it. And I'm reminded of this person that I read about, Ulf Cap. There you go, weird name. Somebody from, it's either Sweden or Norway. Anyways, a true person. He is, maybe he used to be now, an executive for IKEA. Okay, the furniture company. A very successful individual. I read about him in a book called The Myth of Normal. Well, it's a book by a clinical psychologist, right? Quite a recent book. I think it was published last year, 2023. Anyways, in this book by this clinical psychologist, Gabor Mate, Mr. Mate talks about this individual, Ulf Cap, Mr. Cap, who successful, very, very successful at what he does at IKEA, makes a lot of money, tremendous reputation, and probably the envy to many, many people, right? And this person was so dissatisfied with his job. And it was a major issue. So he had to look for professional help, right? And the counsel of Mr. Mate, Gabor Mate, who wrote the book. And in their interactions, this man, Mr. Cap, makes this confession. He says, maybe the reason I hate my life, I'm not happy with my life, is because there's none of me in my job. I cannot relate to what I do professionally in any important way. So there's a huge disconnect between what he was doing for a living and the person he was. And again, this relates to feelings, right? Absolutely. He was probably making a lot of money and thinking, wow, this is the job, right? This is the life. But I'm not happy. I'm not feeling it. I feel the opposite of happiness. I feel miserable. Well, there you go. Pay attention to what you feel for whatever you're doing. If you're feeling good, that's it. That's the right thing. If you're not feeling it, well, try to get at the bottom of it and validate what you're feeling. So now, there is something missing in this account of Maslow take on knowing oneself. I have to say, there's a very important thing missing. And I know this based on something I read in Carl Jung's book, Modern Man in Search of a Soul. Okay. In this book, Jung says that we actually have two means by which we learn about the world and about ourselves. Okay, so we learn about the world and ourselves in two ways. One way is through our feelings. Okay, so Maslow is absolutely correct about that one. Jung says through our feelings we know what's valuable, what matters. Okay, so same thing Maslow is saying right here. But then Jung says the other way we know about the world, we learn, is through our thinking. So there are two things there, your thinking and your feelings. And Jung says that through your thinking, you sort of analyze things, you assess things, you draw conclusions, you make plans, and so on. So that was me, right? That was the only part that I was validating growing up. I was a rational person. Everything has to be, had to be logical and reasonable and so on. And that was my means to understand everything about the world, about myself. But that's true, that's important. But your feelings are also important. So you have to consider those two things. Those two things. You learn about yourself and the world, not only through your feelings, but through your thinking as well. And I think that's definitely missing in this take, Maslow's take on knowing oneself. And here's an example. Here's an example. A student of mine recently, she heard me talking about validating things through our feelings. And she came up to me after class and she said, you know, Mr. Molina, I'm conflicted because I made a commitment to this internship. I'm working for this bank, big bank in the United States, and to do this internship for a year, but I detest it, she said to me, and I hate every day I have to go to this place. And I asked her, why are you doing it? And the why question, right? That's the rational question, the existential question. I said, why are you doing this then? And she said to me, well, because it's going to look great on my resume. And so this is going to help me in my professional career. And then I said, well, then there you go. You're not doing anything wrong. Because this internship is not an end in itself. This is a means to another end. I said, what you're really pursuing is her career. And this is the thing that you really, really value. This internship is just it's just a step in the process. Just like when you go to school and to study something, right? You study a career that you absolutely love, let's say philosophy. You want to be a philosopher too, and you go, but you got to take algebra classes, right? You have to take maybe some science classes and that you don't like a whole lot, and poetry, and I'm like, at least that was me. So, okay, this is what I'm trying to say, friends, because this is what this student brought to my attention. I told her, hey, this does not mean that you have to enjoy everything you do. Like if you don't enjoy what you're doing, that's wrong, that's bad. You have to reject it, push it away. You're in the wrong track. No, no, no. And this is why the thinking is important, right? Because okay, if you're taking a class that you don't like, but it's a means to your end to becoming a professional in whatever, philosophy or whatever, any other career, you have to understand, okay, this is just a step in the process. The step, it doesn't feel great, I hate it, but it's just a step in the process. It's not the goal. It's not my final destination. So that I told the student, you're doing the right thing with the internship. Just, but you just tell yourself, right, that this is just one step in the process. And this is why we need those two things, feelings and thinking. Because you see, the thinking gives you the plan. Okay, I want to do this, I want to achieve this, and then you evaluate. Okay, I need to meet these requirements. I'm going to need to go over these obstacles, and I'm going to have to deal with these things and meet these other requirements. So you do all of that assessment with your thinking. Okay, but what are you pursuing? Whatever thing you're pursuing, that you evaluate with your feelings. Whatever your goal is, your career, your project, whatever your goal, that has to be a feeling assessment. You have to feel like, okay, this is what I really want to do. I really love this. That was me again in college when I decided to become a philosopher. I absolutely fell in love with philosophy in college. And I told myself, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. It felt right. It was the right thing for me to pursue. But then I had to take those requirements that I didn't enjoy a whole lot. So I hope you see the value of this lesson. Yes, like Maslow says, it's true. Feelings tell us what's valuable to us, what matters. But we got to consider our thinking. So we cannot just go about our lives only based on what we're feeling. Gosh, this is especially true when you make any commitment, especially in sentimental relationships. Sometimes you have to make sacrifices, right, for things that matter, and those sacrifices don't feel great, but the opposite. but then you consider with your thinking, right? Well, I must make these sacrifices because in the end, what's truly valuable to me is this relationship or this career or this pursuit or whatever. So I'm repeating myself. That means that I'm done. So I hope this was helpful. And if you found it that way, you found it helpful, please post a comment. I'll be more than happy to read it. For now, that's all I have for you. See you next time.